Okay, thanks everybody for coming, and for people out there on the Zoom call, thanks for attending, and those recorded. Um, it's an exciting time, it's a frustrating time, because as everybody knows, or if you don't, first, my name is Tom Zulis from Innocence Cannabis and Silver Farm Naturals, which is where I started growing CBD under. But we're in that process with New York State, and we haven't quite got our license yet. And we're expecting it to happen, but until it happens, our products are out there in the marketplace. And it's time to start educating people about what all these cannabinoids are all about, why this rollout is happening, and really how the human body works and how we can take these products to enhance our life. Well, one thing that I found in my life is that nobody ever gave me the owner's manual to this human body. So I had to kind of figure things out. And what we've just learned probably in the last 30 or 40 years is just mind-boggling, because we've learned about a system which is called the endocannabinoid system, which is this system right here. And this was discovered in the late 1980s. And it was from an Israeli scientist that was trying to understand how THC affected the human body or mind. And what he discovered was that the way nature designed us is that it's kind of what I call decentralized computing. So instead of my brain being in charge of every single one of these different systems and trying to manage them all, the brain senses a deficiency in one of these systems. And when it does so, it produces a chemical which is called an endocannabinoid. And the word endo means inside body. And when that cannabinoid hits that specific receptor for whatever system is out of balance, it energizes that system and allows it to balance itself, or what we call go to a state of homeostasis, which is where everything in nature wants to be. So nature has given us this system, and we've just learned about this system in the late 1980s. And all of the research about this system has been stifled because of the illegality of this particular plant and the cannabinoids in the United States and the Americas, around the world. And we haven't been doing the research we need to. And this is probably, like I say, this is one of the most amazing discoveries in my lifetime about human health. This answers a lot of questions. And the beauty about it is that the phytocannabinoids from this plant, of which there's 150 of them, are the key to hitting the different receptors here. Now, the reason we know about THC is that it has this different effect to us, and it's called psychotropic. It changes our perception of reality and time. So let's say my reality is one of, let's say I have arthritic pain, or my immune system is out of whack, and I've got inflammation and pain in my joints. Well, if I now hit the receptors for my perception of reality and time, my reality can look different from a different point of view, and it can be a lot less painful because I'm not stuck in that reality. It changes the way that we perceive things. It can also be very detrimental, because if I'm getting out of my reality and I'm looking at it from a different angle, it could look a lot worse, which is what happens when we then have another imbalance, which is called psychosis, or an imbalance where somebody is not in the present moment. And that's the beauty about some of the other cannabinoids, because we talked about THC just now, but that's one of 154, 155 cannabinoids. The number's changing as we research more. CBD hits a different receptor in the human brain, the conscious mind, but it doesn't get us what we call high or psychotropic. Instead, it brings our conscious mind into homeostasis. And the only thing real in our conscious mind is the present moment at this particular time, or whatever moment we're in, and everything else is not real. They're neurological pathways of either the past with memories or projection of the future, and they cause emotion because the mind itself can't distinguish between the present moment or when we're focused on those neurological pathways. So when we take CBD, it makes the path of least resistance being in the present moment and silences those pathways. And that's how it works with things like anxiety and PTSD and addictions, because it allows us to stop that mental anxiety of going down the pathway of thought. We can silence the mind, we can be in the present moment. Everything is fine in the present moment, but when we're in our heads, it's not. So we're figuring stuff out all the time. So the beauty is we're now learning about this, but now we just started learning about this, and now the greatest knowledge about human health supersedes that, and that's gut health. What do I mean by gut health? Well, we're now learning that this tube that runs from my mouth to my butt has all of these sensing systems throughout it, between 50 and 100 million connections. And it's integrated into the brain, the heart, all of the organs, and all of these microbes that are sitting inside this tube that we're either feeding or we're not feeding are providing the chemicals to bring the human body, both mentally and physical, into a state of homeostasis and balance. And we've totally got that wrong. We didn't even know this existed. What did we do? We thought the greatest thing that ever happened was antibiotics. And antibiotics end up causing a lot of damage besides the good that they do. Instead of looking at the destructive side of it, we could have been looking at the building side of it to fortify the good bacteria, to build up the good guys, to get rid of the bad guys on their own, instead of going and blowing everything. So the way that this system works, and the reason that we have to talk about it when we're talking about cannabis, is that this is an integrated system. So one thing does not work without the other. The microbes are communicating to the endocannabinoid system that is communicating with all of the organs and the whole organism as a whole. And guess what? When something happens in life, it affects the human body. So something happens that we didn't expect, and boom, we get excited. We produce all of these chemicals that put us in fight or flight. And at the same time, all of the microbes that are producing chemicals in our gut are influenced by what's happening in the organism as well. They're all part of that environment. We are a superorganism, and we have to understand that we can either have this work for us or this can work against us. It's our choice. It starts with awareness, because if we're not aware that it even exists, you know, I remember at an early age when I looked at an apple, and I always want to know how things work. And then I looked in the toilet and I go, how does it get to look like that? And the teacher said, acid, you know, you got acid in your stomach. And that was the whole explanation, because we didn't know about the microbes. So here's the reality of it, is that in our mouth, we have microbes that immediately, upon sensing what's happening with the food, are communicating with the microbes throughout the rest of the system and throughout the rest of the body. So it's important that if we want to properly bring food into the tube, we should take a look at it. We should think about it. We should give some thought to the food, because all of that is getting the whole human system ready for that food. And then when the food comes in, the microbes in the mouth are immediately communicating, and everything is starting this beautiful magical action. But there's not a ton of microbes once you pass the mouth. You go through the acid bath. It might be, you know, less than 1,000 microorganisms. And then we go into the small intestine. And here there's only up to maybe 10,000 microbes. It's not a huge number. And it goes from being an acidic environment with a real fast moving current to slowing down and becoming more and more alkaline. And then what happens is it drops into the large intestine, which is as tall as I am. The small intestine is 27 feet long, so quite long. The large intestine is only 6 foot, but there's hundreds of trillions of microbes. It was explained to me that if we took dollar bills, we could take and lay them all the way to the sun and back, and we'd still have excess. That's how many microbes we got in our gut. And right now, the fact that I'm talking to you, there's less than 1% human DNA, and there's 99% microbial DNA in and on me that is affecting this organism at all times, because that's the reality of what we live in. That's what we coexist with. And all of these systems are tied together. So when we go through stress, guess what happens? Our endocannabinoid system is pushed out because our hormones are changing and our reactions to things are changing. And the microbe composition in our gut is changing because the opportunistic ones say, oh my God, the body's under stress. I can take advantage. I can get away with it now. And that's the kind of environment we have in our gut. So when we do have a problem, the way I look at it is that everything starts in the gut, that if we have the right proper balance here, then we can have both mental and physical health. If this system fails us, our secondary system that we can rely heavily on is the endocannabinoid system. So why do we see that people are really interested in recreational cannabis? It's because they want to look at their reality in a different way, whether it be painful, whether it be a medical condition, or whether it be a mental issue, whatever it is. And that's a way to be able to get that medicine to bring that mental state into a state of homeostasis as well as a physical state. Because what else it's doing is it's triggering physical reactions, because all of these systems are affected. Cannabis is affecting every single system, because every single system is governed by these endocannabinoids, and that's how nature built us. Not only us, but every mammal, cats, dogs, squirrels, deer, even fish. We're all designed. We're part of nature. We're not separate, and nature is all this way, and we're not above nature. We're all part of the same. Just like the plants, we don't even understand how plants have capability to communicate and have feelings towards us. That sounds beyond our dimension. Well, it's a reality. Plants have feelings. I get attached to my plants, when I'm harvesting them, it's a process. And, I feel bad. I miss my plants. But that's what happens when you are living in nature and you're starting to understand that there's more to our existence than what we've been taught or what we've been told. And now we're starting to get the real knowledge, because we didn't even know about this system, 30 to 40 years ago, 30 years ago. And this system right now, just like growing cannabis, if I don't have the right gut microbes, I'm not going to be physically in the proper health mode or mental mode. And if I'm growing cannabis, if I don't have the right microbes in the soil, then I can't have that plant express itself. That's how tied together we are. There's no difference. The difference is that we have portability with our soil here, and we can put stuff into our soil through our tube, and it's heated, so it works a lot faster compared to the plant that nature's taking care of naturally. Same stuff. And the reality is we need to understand that. Because if we understand that, then we can start to work with this body and this mind and understand how everything is integrated. If we're under heavy stress will tax our endocannabinoid system, and it'll change your gut health. If we go through trauma will change our gut health, and it will strain our endocannabinoid system. And what we have to also understand is there's this other really, really important word, and that is the epigenetics. What that means is that as a human being, I have approximately 23,000 genes, which are the operating code for the human body. And in those, switches are either turned on or off for expression. The epigenetics is now the new study about how our food or our environment causes the expression of our DNA traits to either be turned on or off. So let me explain it. First of all, both of my parents died of cancer. The likelihood is that I have a gene for cancer, which is a problem with the growth of cells in the human body. However, that doesn't worry me because I understand that the epigenetics mean that it's less than a 10% chance, because if I don't turn that switch on, ain't gonna happen. And if I have my cancer fighting switches on, ain't gonna happen. The epigenetics is a study of what causes these switches to be turned on and off. It's cannabinoids, it's microbes in the food that microbes get fed. And when we flip these switches on and off, we're now getting human expression of health. The problem is that genetically, if we go through a lot of trauma, we can cause genetic changes in our DNA that could be passed on for generations, but we can heal it. We could do that right now if we knew how. I'm telling you, there is a way to do that. There's a way by understanding human health and by dealing with both gut health, the endocannabinoid system, because any trauma we go through affected our gut, changes the microbes forever. And this is always changing, you know. It was amazing because I was following these researchers, and two guys every single day would do a fecal sample and then do an analysis of all the microbes that are living inside of them. And while one of the researchers was doing that, he happened to get salmonella poisoning from some food that was undercooked. And you could see how it dramatically changed his whole microbiome. Just everything that was in a certain species and everything completely changed. And the interesting thing was that I had gone through a salmonella poisoning as well, and then had an autoimmune disease that I contracted from that about 8 or 9 years ago. So when I saw this, it really hit home because now I knew what I had to fix. And what it was that all the bad bacteria were really thriving in my body, and all the good guys populations were real low. And then what I had to do was just like you would do in nature. If you got a compost pile that isn't working right, what do? You start giving it the ingredients that it needs to rebuild itself. Starting to put things back into my system, into my tube, to reclaim it, you know, eating live probiotic foods with prebiotics, kimchi, sauerkrauts, yogurts, you know, doing timed feeding where I'm only putting food into the tube for 6 to 8 hours a day, and then a long time where there's nothing going in there. And then doing things like ginger, which is really powerful, and garlic for its capabilities. And after you do that, the whole environment changes, and then all of a sudden, the issues of the autoimmune go away. The body now has the endocannabinoid system is starting to function again. Inflammation is going down, the whole body's starting to operate again. But it's a combination of all the systems, and if we understand these, we can experience what we're meant to experience, which number one would be not only feeling mentally and physically balanced, but what happens then if you were to use and push your endocannabinoid system, and instead of just trying to get to a neutral point of trying to exist, we go from being here to being performing at a much higher level, being able to understand that you're capable of a lot more, but being calm in all situations, being in a state of flow. What's a state of flow? It's not thinking about what's going to be happening next. It's being involved with what's happening now. And when the next thing comes up, you know, you trust that you will know exactly what to do. So you don't have to be missing the present moment to be living 10 minutes or 10 hours or 10 days ahead. You're living in the flow. But you need to calm the mind to do that and be connected with nature. And and that's hard to do. And when the gut's all messed up, it's the way that we react to any given situation in a given moment is the net sum of the neurological chemicals present in our brain at that particular moment. So if all of a sudden I'm driving my car and somebody pulls out in front of me, I could either be yelling and screaming at that person, or I could say, oh my gosh, I hope they're okay. They must be having a tough day. They didn't even see me. And you give them some gratitude that nobody got hurt, and what a difference. But the only reason that could happen is it actually, if you ate the right food 24 to 36 hours before to have enough serotonin in your system, that when that happened, you go, oh, that's not a big deal. But if we don't, what's the opposite? And boom, we fire off, and that firing off again changes all these systems. Everything is interconnected, so every single system is off. And then people need to, medicate to try to find balance or whatever they got to do. But we should be doing it all the time and thinking of it all the time. Are there any questions at all from any of our people in the audience and anybody here? If you guys have any questions, just out. Okay, I'll carry on. You can let me know if we have any.
Okay.
So one of the really interesting things that I've learned doing this is that we've heard about THC, we've heard about CBD, but there's some really neat cannabinoids that are new on the marketplace, and they're really exciting to research them. And I was talking with a couple of the other cultivators that have been doing CBD for a while. And really what we're finding is that we're kind of pioneering because we're able to grow the stuff, we're able to make the tinctures out of it, and then we're able to see how customers are responding to the different medicines that we're making out of it. So it's really kind of cool. So one of the cool cannabinoids we started growing like 3 years ago is a cannabinoid called CBD with a V afterwards. And it's a completely different cannabinoid, but the beauty is it's twice as effective as regular CBD seizures. So let's talk about a seizure. A seizure, in my observation, is a imbalance between the electrical signals and the mechanical response in the human body, causing uncontrollable movement of the system. So if CBDV is twice as effective in zeroing in and hitting that specific receptor and causing it to go back to a state of homeostasis, then that tells me that I could then try to use that for people that have neuropathy pain or maybe a Parkinson's type of an issue. So in other words, and everybody is different. So, CBD is not what helps the body get better. CBD pushes the human body to get better on its own. Yes.
We have a question about, you were just talking about Parkinson's. What about ALS?
I'd have to look at it closer to understand more. But with any of the issues that are happening, I believe that first, there's a two-step approach we should take. We should look at what kind of gut health we can help to help push the human body on its own. And then the second thing would be what cannabinoids for that particular person, because everybody is different. I might take a dose of 100 milligrams of CBDV and my body will respond a certain way. Another person, their body might only need 10 milligrams of that CBDV to do the same thing. We're human bodies, we're complex structures. There's not just one size fits all. We have to understand that with these tools available, we try to see how they can help us. The industry has to be careful because people make health claims that CBD can cure this, can cure Parkinson's. No, it can't. There's an imbalance somewhere, and we're just trying to see if we can match what nature has given us to try to allow the human body to get back to a state of homeostasis. And it's not a one size fits all, and it's not because we're all different. You know, we're learning so much. We're learning now that in science, in using regular medicine, and we're doing chemotherapies, if we don't have the right microbes in our body, the chemo isn't as effective. There's so much more we need to learn. But we are given this beautiful gift of now knowing that this is like the owner's manual, like, holy smokes, we got this. We understand. Now I can think about what's going on in my body, and I got a blueprint of what science is teaching us how it works now. And then we can apply that. And then, you know, we start to talk about different species of bacteria. So here's an example. Beautiful bacteria nature is given to pretty much every mammal on the planet, including us, called L. reuteri. It's this tiny microbe that lives within our gut, and it produces this chemical, this beautiful chemical, which is called anandamide. It's called the bliss hormone. It's the same thing that we feel when we're in love or we're very grateful. Because everything that we feel is a chemical that has that sensation to it, whether it be in our heart or our mind or in our living brain, which is our gut. Those neurological chemicals send off a feeling. And anandamide is one of those feelings that we get. Well, upon a couple of courses of an antibiotic, you can wipe L. reuteri completely out of your gut system. And then we're missing that. And nature gave us a secondary system called the endocannabinoid system. And it just so happens that one of the cannabinoids, CBG as in George, helps the body produce anandamide of its own. And that's where we're finding that certain people, when they take this and it hits their receptor, they feel differently, mentally differently. The individual, Valentino Dixon, that's part owner of Innocence Cannabis, his mother was very depressed and wouldn't get out of bed. And when I told Valentino about CBG and let's try it, first he thought I was crazy for 4 or 5 days. And then he says, what do I got to lose? So he gives it to his mom, and after 3 days, he comes and sees her, and she's not only out of bed, but she's all dressed and wants to go shopping with him. And he goes, holy smokes, Tom, what is this? And it's the way that the human body we understand. And I'm not saying that works for everybody, but I'm saying that this particular case, we were able to get some anandamide in her body more than likely, which allowed her to have a good feeling about things enough that she could lift herself out of bed and decide to do things. And like I say, this isn't like a cure-all for everybody, but it's an amazing science. And I tell you, if we have the opportunity to understand how our bodies work and we could enjoy that so much more, why wouldn't we want to do that? You know, and that's what I implore everybody to do, to try to understand how your body works. What is your deficiencies? You know, what's causing the inflammation throughout the body? You know, if we've got our immune system and our immune system all up in here, you know, we ache in the morning, our body hurts. Well, it's related to 2 things. I can tell you right now. It's the gut health. The biggest problem I see with the gut health is this, is that in this 6'2", the large intestine, where trillions, hundreds of trillions of microbes live, they're all coexisting in there. And on the other side of that gut wall, and it's only 1 cell thick. Think about that. 1 cell is all that holds all those microbes inside. And on this side is your blood side and your immune side. And there's these really cool cells or immune, what I call them is immune cells, and they're called dendritic cells. And they stick their antenna through that little crevice and they do a scan of what's on the other side. And we think it may be with magnetism that they're able to understand what the DNA is of the organism on the other side. And if they go there and they find bacteria that are living that close to the wall or food particles, they come back and they say, this is too close, we gotta go fight it. And the whole body is on high alert, trying to find that particular DNA scan because it's way too close to the front door. Now, if we were eating properly and we had the proper bacteria that are layering up a mucosal wall, which is like manna from heaven. It sounds bad. People say mucus. Ooh. No, mucus is like the perfect environment for bacteria to grow in. And it's food for them. So if we don't feed them, they can eat it. But if we feed them, they produce that, and they produce this other substance called butyrate. Butyrate is like the purest energy source for the human body, but it can only be derived from fiber sources, which 95% of the population doesn't have enough fiber. So we don't have the mucosal wall. And if we do have one, the bacteria eat it all the way down. Now, all of a sudden, a peanut comes through the channel, picks it up. Now the kid's got a peanut allergy for the rest of his life. And the same thing with us. If the dendritic cell goes through and finds mucus there and only friendly bacteria, it comes back and it produces an anti-inflammatory cell called the killer R cell. Now the whole body is starting to reduce inflammation. You're back to a state of homeostasis in your immune system. Why? Because the gut was up, and the gut was causing the endocannabinoid system, the immune system, everything to go haywire. The only way we can balance it is by understanding what we're dealing with, and we can start to balance the two systems back so we get back to a state of homeostasis. How are we doing on time?
7:30.
Great. So, any questions there? No?
I'm
Good.
at the moment.
So, a little bit more about this plant. You know, people say, well, what's the difference between hemp or the THC cannabis that everybody now talks about? It's all the same plant. The plant has different DNA, just like it could be a male or it could be a female. The male would be THC expression, the female would be CBD expression. It's probably not as good of an example because they could be partial numbers. So it's more like maybe your hair being blonde or your hair being black, and maybe it being a combination of those two. That would be how we have a THC product or a pure CBD product. But an example we can also see is where you can cross and get small amounts. So this year we're growing a cannabinoid, which is called, the name of the plant is called Tropicolata. And it's got this amazing aroma, and it's got 4 different major cannabinoids: THC, THCV, CBD, and CBDV. So now we're hitting a whole plethora of major systems throughout the human body. So it's exciting to see these products come out, but now the process of bringing it out and getting feedback on them. We've got it out in a vape cartridge. We're going to have flower hopefully this year to be able to try it that way. The other way that I'm really excited is both tinctures, where we can take it internally, or else topically. So those are the 4 different ways that we'll be doing it. The cannabinoid receptors that I talked about, that are all these receptors, are not only within us, but they're also in your skin. So when we take a CBD product and we rub it, let's say I've got a lot of pain in this area, and I put that CBD right on it, it's not numbing the pain. What it's doing is it's going in there and starting to create homeostasis, stop the overreaction of the neurological impulses that are going, starting to calm the system down. Okay, that's what it's about. One of the interesting things that we observed was that the way the immune system works is that when it gets in overload, we get an autoimmune reaction, which is where the body starts to attack itself. Like I got after the salmonella poisoning, like a lot of people got during the COVID. What happened with COVID, first of all, we don't have a lot of good gut health to begin with. Nobody was taught about that when COVID started, which I think would be wrong. Because if we did this, if we beefed everybody's defense up, you know, it, it's, it's the next step in understanding human health. But when we had COVID, not only did this system go haywire, but then the endocannabinoid system was trying to balance things, and everything went haywire. You know, the microbe balance changed, and vaccines came in, and vaccines changed the microbiology again. So we're dealing with a lot of variable issues. Besides that, the thing that we don't understand is that this tube that goes through us is around 2 tennis courts in size. So it's quite large. It's a lot of surface area, right? And that's what we're protecting here. But what about the pollutants and the environment that we're getting from all of the commercial products? Like, let's say people are putting stuff to wash their hair, soaps, you know, all kinds of personal hygiene products, paints that we paint our walls with that off gas for years. All of these things contribute to a certain load, and the body can only take so much, and eventually that bucket gets too big and then it overflows, and that's when the issues start to happen. And that's what we got to think about, is what are all the things that we're doing on a daily basis that we could eliminate to take that load off of us so that we could be healthier too. So as mindless as it may seem, you ever grab a cup of coffee and it's got that plastic lid on it and you drink it? I never thought about it, but that plastic lid, every time that hot liquid hits that plastic, it vaporizes some of that plastic, and the plastic then goes into the stream and goes into your gut. Microplastics. Same thing about drinking water out of a bottle, plastic bottle. Now finding that we have so many microplastics that they're actually in our bloodstream and they're getting stuck in the plaque in our arteries. And you know, it's another problem. It's another load on the human body. So we need to be aware of all the little things that we're doing that are taking away from our body's ability to be resilient, because eventually we get to that threshold point and the body can't take it, and then systems go out of whack and eventually dis-ease, and then modern medicine wants to treat the symptoms, and that's one way of trying to do it. But if you don't fix the cause, and I always think the gut is still, and Socrates said that everything begins in the gut way back when. And my God, it's so true when you think about it. It's so profound that if I don't eat right, like in 2 days, my attitude will change and my ability to do the stuff that I know I need to do to be healthy will no longer be as committed in my brain. About 2 days. Because that's about how long it takes, because these microbes live for approximately 15 minutes. Think about this. So in one 24-hour period, there's 72 generations of microbes that have been passed along and living within me. So if I'm changing that environment, I can get rapid change in what's going on inside of me, both positive and negative. So that's all it takes, is deciding that, oh, I want to have sugar, I want to have this, and I want to have that, and I want to. You know, it's not taking the responsibility of what I should be doing. It's, you know, I want it because there's probably an imbalance and I have a void and I want to get that filled. Try to do it with food. What ends up happening, the microbes change, and then all of a sudden the thinking changes, and guess what? Those microbes want to get fed, so it's going to be harder to get back on the old diet because these guys are in control now. They've gotten fed. There's one bacteria called Candida. Candida is in all of our systems, but when it gets out of control, and it loves sugar and processed flour products like that, it gets to be such a large part of the living system within us that it's producing a significant amount of a certain chemical that our brain kind of gets used to it. It doesn't make us high, it just kind of feels okay. But when Candida stops getting fed, it stops producing the chemical. And all of a sudden, the brain starts to, it's missing it. It's like you feel like you're not yourself, like you want it, you want that feeling back. So much so that you start getting agitated, and you said you weren't going to have that donut this morning because you're going to kick the habit, but you're so angry that finally, you just decide, oh, why not? And as soon as you do that, because the environment, you're part of those bacteria inside of you, they are so connected to the brain, they just know that the host is going to get the donut. So they start producing the chemical because they're starting to produce their population because they're going to get fed. And that's the reality of what goes on in this superorganism and who's in charge. A lot of times I was eating stuff I had no desire to eat with a rational mind, but when those bacteria are in charge and they want to be fed, they have a profound effect. They're living organisms. They have influence. They operate. It's so cool when you look at it, because a population of these bacteria, when they get to a certain size, they no longer act independently. They get what they call quorum population, and they line up and they function as one. And they know that they can't attack another colony until they get to a certain size. That's how intelligent they are. Way beyond our comprehension. We think we're the main thing in life. It's part of nature, that's all. That's the reality of what's going on. We can either choose to, every day I choose to have an army of microbes that are going to really work to my advantage, mentally and physically, as opposed to something that's just going to taste good. Because I know the difference. And the problem with knowing is that you can't ever go unknowing from what you know is true. If it rings true to you and a lot of this sounds true, you got to explore it, because, and I'd love to know if somebody else's reality says that mine is crazy, but, I don't see it. I see this other beautiful part of what we're part of. We're part of this beautiful natural process where plants are growing, communicating, sharing resources, and perfect example of what we should be doing as human beings. They're living in the moment. They have too much, they give to the neighbor. Imagine a world that we lived in that's so connected, that we cared about everybody, and we had access, we took care of them, and everybody could just be happy-go-lucky every day. No way in hell to do it with our gut health the way it is. Most people can't even silence the mind. Just meditation, powerful, powerful tool. Really powerful, and I can't explain the feeling when the first time did a meditation with gratitude for the microbes that have been working for hundreds and thousands of generations inside of me to keep me alive and healthy. And not once in that whole 67 years prior to me doing that meditation did I ever think about them or thank them with the gratitude. And I'll tell you, it was different. I mean, these are living organisms and they feel things, just like when something happens, and don't you get a gut feel about somebody, something, and if gut microbes are using magnetism for their ability to do what they're doing, is it possible that our greeting when we go and we handshake somebody, that we're getting a gut feel about that person, that our microbes are assessing who's in there and what they are and what the composition are? Is that possible? I don't know, but I'm not closing my mind to it, because, this whole world is a lot different than what I was taught. It's not the way it was. And making money is definitely not a purpose, because it's a waste of your attention and your energy, always looking for that thing. You're missing every single moment. It's not what life's supposed to be. It's all I get. We're only here so many days and nobody's getting out. Any questions there?
No.
Okay. So next week, I'm going to prepare some slides and we're going to get into some more of the science behind the endocannabinoids. We will have to incorporate some of the gut health as well because it just all plays together. But we're going to start to do more meetings. And I'm really looking forward to getting feedback from people, what their experience is using different cannabinoids, sharing it with other people. It's really important stuff. And the best thing I find about community is that, whatever's happening on a big scale, it's not real to us. What's happening on a community level is real. So if we start to really learn and work together as a community, no matter what happens on a bigger picture, we'll be able to handle it. Especially if we're eating right, we got our endocannabinoid system, then we won't be part of the problem, we'll be part of the solution. Not that hard. It's just, taking responsibility for this amazing, beautiful gift that we were given, but we weren't taught about how it works. And now the knowledge is there. It's just, do we want to open that book? Do we want to start to understand? But when you do, when 20 years ago, when I was achy and, my brain started to get a little foggy and everything, people said, that's what happens when you get older. It's like, geez, it's going to be a long life. And then all of a sudden, when I learned about all this stuff, I can run up the stairs. I can do what I used to do 20 years ago. My brain is sharp as it used to be. And the only thing holding me back is if I don't stick to the plan and I decide that I want to go back to the old memories of what I used to do, was finding comfort in foods and things like that. And when I do that, then I'm not doing what I need to in order to keep everything in the proper balance. But and nothing's perfect, and it's not meant to be perfect. This is life. The biggest thing is this, is that no matter what we do, the worst thing we can do is be our own worst enemy and shame ourselves, not feel good about ourselves. That affects your gut health. It affects your endocannabinoid system. That's part of your environment. The reason I meditate every day, and the reason I meditate every day with a guided meditation at least once a day, is that if I don't hear somebody else's voice in my head, I'm only going to listen to my own voice in my head. And if that's all I listen to my own shit, I'm going to be full of my own shit. I need to have somebody else's point of view on a regular basis to be able to keep me from getting carried away in my own head with my own thoughts. And that's what I like about doing a meditation, is that it's that time to reset yourself and figure out, what is this whole journey for? And why am I obsessed about something maybe monetarily that might happen in 2 weeks and might not happen in 2 weeks, or something that happened 2 nights ago with a family member that something didn't work the way you wanted it to? And why do we rehash these things over and over? When right in front of us is the gift of the present moment. And people in the community that are sitting there with the same ability to get together and talk and make it a beautiful time, but they don't know how to connect, or may not want to, because if the gut health isn't right, who wants to go out and communicate? We got a question?
Can you share your favorite gut health and endocannabinoid books with us?
Let's see. Yeah. Let me do this. Let me go grab the book so I don't misquote who the author is. It's right here. So this one is called Super Gut by Dr. William Davis. Amazing book. The best part about this book is that he's the guy who opened my eyes to the fact that I could then buy individual strains of certain probiotics, the live bacteria in capsule form. And there were like 2 billion colony forming units in that capsule. But he taught me how to take that capsule and to buy some organic half and half and get some inulin, which is microbial food, take those capsules and put it in there, put it into a machine at 102 degrees, roughly body temperature, a little higher. And after 30 hours, we go from 2 billion colony forming units to 450 billion colony forming units of this beautiful probiotic. And then what I did was I started putting that back into the system. And I did that not only for me, but I did that for my two sons. And part of the reason was that I realized that both of my sons had probably gone through 20 plus courses of amoxicillin throughout their young life. And now they were having a lot of difficulty coping with stress, anxiety, things would come up. There'd be, a lot of anger. And after doing a lot of research, it just clicked. They don't have the support. They don't have the mental support. No wonder. See, they don't want to be that way, but they didn't have the mental support. So I specifically bought probiotics like L-Reuteri. I put L-Reuteri back in their gut. And there's a whole list. This is the most researched area of gut health. It's mental balance with guts and how they correspond. So now there's actual probiotic you could buy that's specifically for mental balance or mental, and even for children. So a beautiful company called BioGaia, B-I-O, Gaia, G-A-I. And they actually make even probiotics for children that are, and they even pointed out that if you take the probiotic, it pays for itself because you're not getting the bowel movements you would get without it, and the baby is healthier and it sleeps better at night too. And the problem we're having is that 50% of the children are born C-section or thereabout, and the problem is they haven't been given the proper seeding of all of the microbes. And it's an amazing understanding when you see how nature is meant. What we're really learning is that our mothers are really, really special, because not only did they give us the DNA and dad give DNA, but mom gave us all of her microbes. And those are sacred because those have been passed down for generation to generation. And when we're born, we're just smothered with them from the mother. And we're born C-section, we get a fraction of that, and we get it from everybody else in the hospital, everybody else that's present, from microbes that aren't as meant to be present as the ones that we were meant to at birth. But again, if that did happen, that we had a C-section, then it's okay, because these things change so much, we can change that. So there shouldn't be any shame or any negativity. It just is what it is, and now it could be fixed. So whatever it is, it's not a big deal as long as we know with what we're dealing with and how we can go forward from there. Like I said, we got a bad compost pile because somebody threw an animal carcass in there without us knowing, and it stinks, and all of a sudden, the flies are around there, and we never had that in the compost pile. We can fix it. It's not the end of the world. We don't have to throw the compost out and start all over. So we could fix it. So that is one of the books that I think is a really good basic book. It's a good workbook. I refer to it a lot. It's really beat up because I'm constantly making these different yogurts and then implementing them. And then, there's a chart they show that the reason commercial yogurts are sold the way they are is because they want to turn those batches over about every 4 to 8 hours so they can have high production. When you're going this 30-hour time, it takes a long time. And then you have to be careful because you don't want to go over, because then they start to drop off. So you time it perfectly, and then you grab these and then you put them in the fridge to preserve them, and they're living things. And you bring them back in. You put them in the tube. It's just a tube. And if the tube isn't working right, then fix the tube. That's all it is. One cell thick, though. Yeah. Any other questions there? Okay.
Oh, sorry. Author again is Davis, William
Yeah.
Davis.
William Davis, MD. And then on the endocannabinoid system, I will have a book for you next week. I believe it's the medical cannabis book. It's a woman author. She's an amazing doctor. She specializes in juvenile health, and she uses a lot of the cannabinoids with children to deal with some of the imbalances, which I think is just amazing. Yeah. But I'll get the name of that book. And there's more and more of these coming out. I'm listening to another book now called Gut Feelings, and really interesting because they're talking, about how a lot of the trauma, can actually be embedded in our DNA, and can cause us to have inherent depression because of generational issues. So people that may have survived the Holocaust or something very difficult, they find that for generations after, they have mistrusting of people because that's the traits that were then triggered to be an alarm to protect that human system, because that's how we're designed by nature. But if we know that, we can then change that environment to flip that switch back, because it's still a switch. It's not permanent. But if the switch is on, then we have to, and it's both mental and it's physical. So, you might have to go through some mental work as to, get forgiveness or to get mental acceptance of that. Maybe to get a good realization that it's in the past. It's not real anymore. It did happen, but it's not today. And today's all that's real. But that takes a long time to get to that point when this is so prevalent that it's always in the back of your mind. It's a pathway. So we got to stop that pathway from going down. How do we stop that neurological pathway? Let's see if we can get some gut health assistance. Let's see if we can get some endocannabinoid assistance and break that pattern. Bring the person back to a state of homeostasis in the present moment, not in their head. Great. So next week we will get into more in depth with some cannabinoids and reactions and some studies and some different things, and also some things we can do. I'll get into specific foods that you could try to incorporate, different ideas, just simple steps. One of the biggest things I can say is water. Is make sure your water is a good, clean source of water where the chlorine and the fluoride has been taken out of it. It's essential. We're 70% water. Our human bodies, plants are water. Water is, life is all made of. So make sure we're getting good, clean water into our bodies, and enough water. That's probably one of the biggest things that I see with human health, is that we don't hydrate ourselves enough. And then we're not as lubricated as we should be. With the plant, we could see it. With us, we can't. We don't have leaves that show it. We just start to slow the brain down. The functions start to slow down in the body. Everything is just kind of slowing down. There's no juice left. Got to hydrate. Really important. Those are a couple of the real simple things, but we'll get into more of the other things that we can really enhance human health and take it to the next level. So thanks for everybody online, and we'll see you next week.